As we get towards the end of the year, it's time to talk about our reservoirs. So today's Water Resources Outlook will be devoted to reservoirs and how things are looking as we approach recharge season for most of the Southeast. So when I say most of the Southeast, what I'm talking about is we're going to talk about Florida kind of separately a little bit later, just because its seasons are a little bit different from the rest of the Southeast. And so we'll focus right now on most of the rest of the Southeast. And as we look over the eastern seaboard, this is a 30-day precipitation departure from normal, and the yellows and the browns are showing below normal precipitation over that 30-day period, and much of the eastern area of Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia are showing a below normal. As you move a little bit further inland and closer to the mountains, there are some spots in the southeast RFC's area that are normal or slightly above normal, but those spots are few and far between. As we move a little bit further west and south into Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, the top of the Tombigbee Basin has seen some heavier rainfall, had some minor flooding over the last 30 days, but for the most part, we've seen very little flooding over most of the southeast, and we'll talk in a minute about how kind of that's affected our reservoirs. But how has it affected our stream flows first? The green, the normal, is prevailing over most of the southeast. That's mostly what you see, with a spattered in few above normal and much above normal in the light blue and the dark blue, and then with a few below normal in the yellow and the red. But those, there aren't very many of those over most of the bulk of the southeast, and so we really kind of have a good near normal stream flows for most of the southeast. So let's first look at the Georgia reservoirs and take a look at the observed pools and how far they're off from their target pools are for this time of year. Many of these reservoirs are lowering their pools so they can handle the heavy rainfall and potential flooding waters during that time. That includes Carter's, Lake Lanier, Lake Allatoona, West Point Lake, so they're all lowering their pools so they can handle flooding situation, but they're already a little bit below normal, so they may not be falling very much more towards the winter season. Lake Allatoona's a little over 5 feet below normal. West Point Lake is a little over almost 5 feet below normal. Lake Lanier is about 3 feet below its full pool for right now. So just kind of where the target pool is supposed to be, and this is not unusual for this time of year, as this is kind of our dry time of year, and they tend to fall, and so naturally they look that way. So we're going to look to focus on one up close, and that's Lake Lanier. And on here you can show the actual elevation, which is the blue line. The blue line is the actual elevation, and the red dots are the ones that are showing the forecast elevation. The historical mean is this orange line, and you can see we followed this pretty closely, but have stayed above. We've had enough rainfall and enough water in the system that we've kept it above what the median normally is. So you can see the different zones where they manage the water differently, but right now the range between 1960 and 2013, so we've had many years where we've been very low, we've had some years where we've been pretty high at this time. Right now we're just a little bit maybe above normal for this time of year for Lake Lanier. Now let's move up into South Carolina and see what we've got up here. Now Lake Hartwell, which is at the top of the Savannah Basin, and Lake Thurmond, they kind of work together. They work as a system, so they typically tend to fall at the same rate during when we start to get into a drought and start to get a little bit below normal. And Lake Hartwell is about 4.5 feet above normal. Right now Lake Thurmond's 5 feet below normal. And so let's get in the central part of the state with Lake Wateree, just a little bit below normal, and the same with Lake Murray. Let's take a closer look at Lake Hartwell at the top of the basin, and the first thing we'll look at is the Hartwell Basin rainfall. And you can see the red shows the average rainfall for the basin in each of the months. Okay, so you go from October all the way through October of this year. The blue shows the observed precipitation. And you'll notice that over most of the southeast, now during the winter we were a little bit below normal, but as we started the winter we were above normal in December. So the reservoir got up to its normal level and was able to stay that way through the winter months. And then as we got into the spring and into the summer, we really weren't that far below normal. We kind of had a mixed bag. A few of the months were above, a few of the months were below. And so what's happened during that time? Well, here's the Hartwell Pool elevation. The blue shows the observed elevation. The green shows the guide curve, where they want to try and keep the reservoir at that level at any given time of year. And as you can see, it's at this time that they're starting to lower it just a little bit, again, so they can handle floodwaters during that time. But it is following along with the average elevation, which is this red line that's running through here, and you can see it's following very closely to that. Climatology kind of says, again, dry time of year, we tend to want to fall during this time of year, but we've had just enough rain to keep along that guide curve, or to keep kind of close to that guide curve, and right now we're at winter pool. If we can get enough rainfall as we get into winter, we'll see how that impacts it, and we'll talk in a little while about what we're expecting for rainfall for the winter. So here's our look at the North Carolina reservoirs, and as you can see, they're very near normal. Kerr, Scott, and Falls Lake are just slightly above normal. Jordan Lake is about a little over a foot below normal, and Lake Norman is a little bit above normal. So let's take a closer look at Falls Dam and the inflows into Falls Dam. The lighter color, the whitish color, shows what the normal is, the median inflow into the dam. And as early in the year we talk about recharge season being in January, February, March, and you can see the high flows into the dam on a regular basis. And as we get into the summer months, you can see that fall off, with September, October, and November being the lowest inflows into the reservoir. So that's typically what we would expect during a normal year. Now, the average inflows right now in 2014 are in the dark blue, and in the March, April, and May time frame we were much above normal. And as we got into the summer months, we stayed, in some months we were a little bit below normal, and in some months we were a little above normal, which is why we currently are a little bit above normal in Falls Dam. So here's the lake level since the beginning of the year, and over most of the year they have stayed above their guide curve. Their green line is the guide curve, and the blue line shows the lake level during that time. And as we've gotten into the summer months, we've crept below and above and been very near that guide curve during that time. This is the forecast as we go from today on into the end of the year, and right now we're still continue to stay dry, and they are very conservative about how they measure that. So it does look like we'll drop below, but it does look like as we get to the end of this period and the December time frame, we'll have a little bit more water to work with. So now let's go down into Florida, and we'll talk about the 30-day precipitation departure from normal from them. And as you can see, we've had above normal rainfall over central Florida and a good part of the Gulf Coast. We've had some flooding in the central Florida area. We've also had some heavy rainfall directly over the reservoir, which has made the reservoir go up recently just from rain on top of the reservoir. It had been creeping up before and was starting to come down a little bit as we went from the wet season and are transitioning to dry season. An area of rain fell over just the lake and made the lake rise. So here's our stream flows over most of Florida, and as you can see where we've had the heavier rainfall over central Florida, our gauges are above normal, either above normal or much above normal. And then over most of the rest of Florida, they're near normal with some spotty areas of below normal. So what's that done to Lake Okeechobee? Well, from the beginning of the year, it looked like we were staying at the below normal, below the average elevation for that time of year. So in a good area, and then over the summer during the wet season, we did rise a good bit and have gotten above the 15-foot level, which is one that we stay very closely monitored to. And then just recently we had a heavy rainfall that took it up pretty quickly. Again, I mentioned that was just over the lake. But we are getting to the dry season, and we'll have to watch because we still have the potential for above normal precipitation even during the dry season. So we'll have to watch that, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. So now here's our total basin precipitation forecast from Tuesday the 28th of October to Tuesday November 4th. And as you can see, over most of the southeast, we're below an inch of rainfall. There are a couple of spots in the top of the Tongue-Bigby Basin in Mississippi and Alabama that could receive some rain that's just above an inch, but for the most part, less than an inch of rain over most of the southeast. As we get into the second week, the models are leaning towards having a front come through and have some rain early in that period, but it keeps pushing it out. The models, every time we get to day 7, it continues to push it out just a little bit, and so we'll be watching that closely with a close eye to see if that ends up developing. But it does look like there is still a chance of having some above normal chances of rain during that second week from November 4th through that Tuesday, November 10th. As for our ENSO conditions, they haven't changed much. We're still looking for a weak El Nino during this time. So what does a weak El Nino mean? Well, this is the November outlook for 2014, and over most of our area in the southeast, we're looking at equal chances for above normal, near normal, or below normal precipitation, which means probably not a whole lot of rain, at least for right now. And then once we get into the November through January time frame, the 3-month time frame, that El Nino tends to kick in a little bit, and it looks like we'll have chances for above normal precipitation over much of our area in the southeast. And then we look at the time frame from February through April, and again we still see above normal precipitation over much of the southeast, with some below normal chances creeping in the north. So and equal chances over the Mississippi and Alabama area for the end of the spring, end of the winter, and into early spring. So the bottom line, in the short term, the dry fall will start to give way to recharge season over most of the southeast as we transition over. We're still going to be dry probably in these first early couple of weeks, but then looks like things will start to transition into maybe a little bit more wet, maybe a little bit more active. Florida, dry conditions look like they're going to continue over the next couple of weeks. As for the long term, chances for above normal rainfall as the winter approaches, with a weak El Nino expected to be going into winter. Our next water resources outlook is expected to be recorded on November 18th.